Giles now believed that he was about to be raped before being killed. His life began to flash before his eyes, images of his childhood, his family, like a slideshow in his mind's eye. Time slowed to a crawl and everything went silent. Dating apps. Meeting people on dating apps has now become the norm. From Tinder to Bumble to Hinge, we live in the age of swipe culture. And although there's always some element of danger to any situation where you're meeting and going on dates with strangers, online dating has always presented unique risks. In 2008, Giles Ziltetro's wife moved to Edmonton, Canada for work. This was their second big move in just a few years. And Giles stayed behind for a little bit so he could wait for their house to sell and also work some more, save a bit more money, and establish some security for them in their new city. But then after he moved to Edmonton to join her, his wife had a surprise in store for him. She wanted a divorce. But after a while, once the pain of his divorce subsided, he started thinking about dating again. So Giles decided to explore the world of online dating. A woman using the name Spiderwebs with 2 Z's caught his attention. So Giles sent the young woman an instant message, and he got a reply back almost immediately. He told her he was free that weekend, and she asked if he wanted to hang out that Friday. Definitely, he told her. But then she gave him some very specific instructions on what to do after he arrived to pick her up. She lived in a basement apartment inside of a house, she said, and he'd have to drive through an alley and park in the back of the house to access it, and then walk through the detached garage. This all seemed a bit strange to Giles, but then again, all of online dating was a strange new world to him, and he tried to look at this as an adventure. Giles gelled his hair, grabbed his wallet and cell phone, threw on a jacket, and darted out the door. It was already getting dark, so he kept an eye sharply peeled for the landmark she gave him. He took the right turn down the alleyway, and seeing the garage door partly cracked, he knew he'd reached the right location. He noticed a bunch of garbage and an old couch leaning up against the fence. Now, once inside the garage, he saw that it was pretty dirty, and there was some kind of dark film covering the windows. In one corner of the garage, he saw an old wooden chair and a steel drum. But what he was looking for was the door into the backyard. And as he reached out and turned the doorknob, someone, Sheena was his first thought, grabbed him from behind. And before Giles could even process what was happening, began beating him in the head. Then the person behind him reached around and pressed into his chest with what he later realized was a stun baton. When he turned around to face his attacker, he was horrified by what he saw. A figure in a hockey mask, painted black and gold, with their head covered completely by a hoodie. Giles grabbed the end of the baton and tried to wrestle it free from the man's hand. And just then, the man drew a handgun and pointed it at Giles. "Get down on the ground. Lie down on your stomach." He got down on the floor of the garage and put his hands behind his back. That's when Giles realized he wasn't being robbed. This was something far worse. And since he knew this man was going to kill him, he felt he had nothing to lose in at least attempting to fight. The man drew his gun and pointed it at him again. Giles moved in and grabbed the end of the barrel, pushing it away from his body. And from what Giles could feel in his hand, the gun was plastic. What a sense of relief he felt in that moment. The whole balance of power suddenly reversed, he thought. Giles kicked his attacker in the groin, but then the man headbutted Giles. And as the man grabbed a hold of his jacket, Giles slid right out of it, dropped to the floor, and rolled himself through the slightly ajar garage door and onto the unpaved driveway. As he returned to his truck, Giles peered beneath the slightly ajar door of the garage and saw the stranger's boots as the man paced back and forth inside the garage. On the floor lay Giles' jacket, and for a brief moment, a wave of boldness surged through him as he considered snatching the jacket right quick, but he thought he'd better not press his luck. He shut the truck door, started up the truck, put it in reverse, and got out of there. He began to fear that without the proof of this exchange and proof of the person's profile, no one would believe his story. But one thing Giles did have the foresight to do was copy and paste her pictures and the directions she'd given him to that garage. So as much as he knew he should go to the police, he decided to sit on it. Meanwhile, that same weekend, Friday, October 10th, exactly 1 week after Giles' attack, a 38-year-old man named Johnny Brian Altinger told his friends he'd had a hot date that weekend with a woman he'd met on Plenty of Fish. A little later, around 9 a.m., Johnny sent out an email to all of his coworkers and friends, which said that he had met, quote, "an extraordinary woman named Jen who has offered to take me on a nice long tropical vacation. We'll be staying in her winter home in Costa Rica. Everyone in Johnny's office was perplexed by his seemingly abrupt, out-of-character departure. And this time, a missing persons report was filed with an actual case number. The cops were able to locate the address, and then they got in touch with the rental company that leased it. Investigators learned that the garage was being rented to a man named Mark Twitchell. Twitchell was contacted by police and summoned to the rented garage, where he allowed them inside to search. So they broke through it, and immediately the smell of gasoline and char hit their nostrils. Off to the side, there was an oil drum, and next to it, a wooden chair and a table. And on the table was a receipt from a hardware store dated October 15th for rubber gloves, plastic sheeting, paper towels, a respirator mask, and a bottle of heavy-duty cleaning solvent. The items had been paid for with a MasterCard. Constable Maxwell repeated, "Can I please see your MasterCard?" Twitchell opened his wallet and quickly thumbed through it. The office compared the card number to the last 4 digits on the receipt. And what do you know? It matched. Among the items they seized from Twitchell's home was his computer. And on the hard drive of his computer, detectives found parts of a deleted document which had been called SK Confessions. They printed it out, and Detective Clark began reading it and was totally blown away by what he was seeing. What followed was a diary detailing how he'd aspired to be like TV's Dexter and planned to bait and kill adulterous married men. With what could only be described as a mountain of evidence, police arrested Twitchell on October 31st, 2008. He was sentenced to the maximum penalty, life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. This was in 2011. After the trial, he led authorities to where he had dumped Johnny Altinger's remains, and they were able to recover them and return them to his family.